Okie dokie. Right. Well, I'm Joe Richardson. I am 35 years old, and I'm based in London, but I'm originally from Edinburgh in Scotland. I have been making games for 6 or 7 years now. I started when I was in art school. I went to art school rather too old to get the right things out of it, but I did sort of find my way into games while I was there. And I make point-and-click adventure games with montage art style. The last two of which have been made with Renaissance paintings.
So, yeah, I mean, I guess that would be a good place to start, and you've likely discussed it elsewhere in the past, but for those who are unfamiliar, with these recent ones, or I guess just that style in general, how did you hit on that as like a way that intrigued you or excited you or felt comfortable making games?
So I've made collages for a long time. I like making things. At art school I did a lot of, I studied illustration, but I can't really draw, so I did a lot of making things that disguised the fact that I couldn't draw. So like making animations, or making 3D models, or writing little stories that people wouldn't actually even read, so it was a waste of my time. But collage is a way of making imagery in more of a, structured, careful way than I was capable of doing with drawing or any other medium. So when I started making games, I made a game at art college. My first game, Preposterous Awesomeness of Everything, was my final year project. It started as my final year project at art school. I didn't actually finish it until a good year after leaving. But it seemed like the natural art style to use. And that was all collages made from photographs. So found photographs and photographs I'd taken merged together. It was originally supposed to be quite a loose sort of collage style, but the more I worked on it, the more I sort of made the joins cleaner and made things work together better, and it sort of fit into a weird, like, half realistic, half cartoony freak show style of artwork that people didn't really like. It didn't go down terribly well, but I liked it, and it was very fitting for that game. That game was like a slightly angry satire about the grotesqueness of life, so having grotesque artwork worked rather well. While I was working on that, I decided that if I used the same technique but with more attractive material to start with, I could make something that was striking and very attractive.
So how did that shift to, as you call it, a more striking art style? Did you notice? I mean, I've seen it in just people discussing it, or it's even used in the shorthand in discussing your work. Beyond just talking about the visuals themselves, have you noticed how a shift to that art style impacted the way people received or reacted to your work?
You mean changing to the Renaissance style?
Yeah, because I might. I've noticed some things, but I don't know what you've noticed. I'd rather you go first.
Well, yeah, people definitely have reacted a lot more positively to the Renaissance ones than to the ones made of photographs of my own naked body, unsurprisingly.
Yeah.
think it's also, like, I really liked that first game. I still think it's a better piece of work. And I think the people who like that game, like, there's people who really love it, and it's weirder and more personal and more interesting for me. So the Renaissance stuff's definitely got more mass appeal, and it's more, I mean, you can't deny that it's more attractive to look at. But that doesn't mean it's sort of better artistically, does it?
Well, does it obscure, does that come to the detriment of, like, them discussing or latching onto other aspects of your work, or does the art style tend to, has this discussion of the art style, like, dominated, what conversations you may overhear or you may get emailed to you about your work?
Well, I try my best to avoid conversations about my work in general, so
yeah,
I don't have
it's probably wise. Yeah.
But no, at, like, games conventions and stuff, I always end up talking to people, and I mean, there's sort of standard questions. People are always interested at games conventions about, like, what engine did you use? So there's still, like, standard questions that everyone gets asked. But yeah, in terms of, like, artistically, it's the art style that is the thing that jumps out at everyone.
So, do you know who is your current audience then? I mean, I don't mean in terms of, like, oh, cool, thoughtful people. Do you have a sense of it on a more granular demographics type level?
No, I don't.
No.
I actively avoid knowing that sort of thing. I know, like, a lot of people are sort of tracking all their metrics and, keeping Google Analytics spreadsheets,
right,
and, getting deep diving into all this nonsense. But I have no idea. I know that people have bought the last one, which is nice. Money comes from
yeah,
that,
right.
But beyond that, I don't know.
Well, I'm actually pretty similar in that regard, and I guess we could talk a little bit about that. But so that's obviously a choice that you've made, to sort of disengage, or to rather, not engage with looking under the hood of certain aspects of it. So, have you always been that way, or does that come from your background as an artist, or was this a thing you only started doing when you started making games, or how did you wind up just sort of not being interested in it, which is, totally valid, and again, I'm totally the same way with my stuff.
I've definitely always been that way. Like, between high school and art school, I spent like 10 years, most of which was holed up in my bedroom in my parents' house, just making things with no intention of showing people, really. I showed my friends, like, I've made music for a long time. I played that to friends. I made animations and I put them up on Newgrounds and stuff. I wrote little short stories and novellas and sent them off to McSweeney's Quarterly or whoever might be interested. But I mean, when I was working on these things, I was just a kid in his bedroom trying to keep busy, trying to, make stuff. And then at art school, I was very much, they didn't like that. It was all like, you have to tell me who's your audience. Quite often tutors would say, well, yeah, but who's this for? I said, well, it's an art school project, it's for you, you're the tutor. Like, no.
Did you forget that this is for you? Yeah.
Like, my point of making a piece of art school is to, like, amuse or anger you.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I've never... But with games, though, I suppose it's slightly different, because I'm aware that I should, like, this is my job now, and I should be engaging with that sort of thing in terms of, like, promoting myself better and selling my product. Because, I mean, you can't just make something and not... Well, I mean, you can, but then I'd have to have a real job as well. So, I feel like before I didn't care, I just didn't think about it. But now that I'm making games, I'm aware that I should be thinking about it. And it's something that I've tried to think about more in the past, and it's like scary and stressful and horrible. And I just have learned that I'm not capable of addressing these problems. So I just try and put it out of my mind, basically. I just work on making little games and keep them comfortable.
So, you may not think of it in this way, so, you know, growing beyond where you are currently, maybe in terms of audience size. Honestly, the word audience is a thing that even kind of makes me feel uncomfortable. But, you know, so like, you know, you getting to whatever the next level is that you might have in mind with your work. If you think about it, like, what do you think are like the pros and cons of, you know, being on the rung currently above where you are right now as far as making games?
I'm not sure what the next rung looks like, to be honest.
Is the next rung just being able to continue as you have?
That's all I've ever worried about, yeah.
Yeah.
I've never thought about, like... Well, no, that's not true. I have sort of, on occasion, when working on something, thought about how nice it would be working with a small team, so I would be capable of doing more. Sometimes I'll want to do something with a game, and I know I'm not capable, and it's like 2 years of work to learn to do the thing. So,
like what sort of things? Well, I mean, you don't have to say specifics, but just the nature of them.
Well, just like more technical stuff. I'd like to make something more fun, more like a proper game, point-and-click adventure games. I mean, who's playing this crap anymore, eh? I don't play them. They're boring. Sit straight upright, looking at your monitor with using the stupid mouse. Like, people who use gamepads and sit back with their feet on the coffee table now to play games.
Right.
And yeah, but proper games are hard to make.
I've heard.
When I started 6 odd years ago or whatever, I had no experience at all with programming. So just being able to make what I am making was quite a big learning curve. And I'm trying to keep progressing, but making something like... I don't really know what it is I want to make, but I can see that there is a huge space of possible games out there that I just can't aim at because of technical restrictions.
Do you feel like, I mean, because that's sometimes a question I like to ask too, is like, well, when you finish, you call it your job, so that might be why, but like, just, when you finish one, like, why make another, you know, especially like from what you were saying, like you do other work in other disciplines, so like, how can you tell where, oh, this idea that I have, this would be a game, or, you know, this would be a game that I would do in a certain way, as opposed to, oh, well, this isn't a game, this is, you know, something else.
Since I started making games, I've only really wanted to make more games. It seems like the games I'm making have so much more value, like literally, in terms of how much money I can make from them, but also creatively for me than anything else I was making before. I think that's largely because it encompasses so many of the other things I was doing. Like, I'm not a terribly good writer, I'm not a terribly good artist, I'm not a terribly good musician, but when I'm making a thing where I've done all those aspects of it myself, it feels like it is more of an impressive feat to have made a whole game. And when I look at a finished game I've made, I can think, yeah, that's like I made a proper fucking video game. That's good. Huh?
Do you feel like I mean, it might be hard to quantify, because like each game, even if you're working in the same genre or whatever, it may not be exactly the same, but do you feel like you've learned something more about yourself about making games, like when you've completed one and that you're able to put into practice on the next one?
Well, just going back to what led me to make another game, I mean, that was a big question for me after I made that first game, because it was 2 years of work. Like, the first half was an art school project, so I would have been doing something anyway. But then after I left art school, I've not got a lot of money. I'm working a part-time job, living in London, which is expensive.
Yeah.
I spent nearly a year making this game, and like I was dead broke by the time it was finished, and then no one bought it. So that was like, why did I make another game at that point? It's a real head scratcher.
Yeah.
But I know. I think I felt like I was onto something. Like, even though it wasn't commercially successful, I felt that I'd made something really good. I was really happy with it, and so I guess that's what led me to just have another go at it.
Well, you also said, I mean, I don't know, yeah, you said, just in our emails before this, that you don't really feel part of or terribly connected to the video game ecosystem, and that you're, quote, watching these things from the sidelines. So I guess I was curious, like, how much of that comes from, I don't know, like some aspect of the ecosystem itself, or just active choices on your part. I mean, was this another thing that you sort of felt from your background before games, or you operated in a similar fashion?
I think it's a bit of both. I think the ecosystem, as you call it, is of games is like huge and sprawling and encompasses so many different worlds that it's hard to feel like part of it as a whole. I can't imagine that many people feel like they're sort of... Actually, people do talk about themselves as like being part of the game dev scene and stuff. I don't know. It's definitely also something that I've always not really, been involved in big groups of people doing specific things. I don't know.
Well, I don't know. I mean, people call it, I mean, I don't even know. Ecosystem, I found maybe a better word than the industry or the game dev scene, because I feel like oftentimes, like, well, what are people even talking about when they say that? And I don't make games, but I mean, is it Twitter? Is it a series of like, Slack message groups, or like, what is it that people are talking about? Because oftentimes it's not a place you can physically go to. I mean, have you tried in the past? Like, have you thought like, oh, okay, well, I'll hang out with or speak with online with people in my genre or something? I mean, have you made efforts like that, or?
I do have connections with it. I'm not like completely on the sidelines. I mean, I go to conventions and I'm on Twitter. I try my best to use Twitter, although I'm really bad at Twitter. I read it a lot, but I never tweet.
Hey, lurking is underrated, but yeah.
But yeah,
underrated, underrated, yeah.
It's debatable. Games conferences is a good example because they're all so different, and the people are all so different that attend them.
Mm-hmm.
Like after I released 4 Last Things, the first Renaissance one, that year I went to quite a lot of conventions, and some of them were just horrendous. Like how sort of corporate, and I was, from their point of view, there to learn how to make more money, basically. It's just like I didn't know what to expect when I started doing these things, because I hadn't been in the industry at all, and I was taken aback by some of it. But then there's other ones, like there's one convention, Adventure X, which is like a narrative specific event that happens in London, and there I feel like, they're my people. I feel comfortable finally when I'm at Adventure X, because everyone's sort of making the same sort of slightly niche, story driven, interesting games. So yeah, I mean, it's just so vast and wide ranging.
So what are
maybe
what are the types of conversations you feel like you can have with Adventure X? Like what are the kind of conversations you feel like you can have there that you can't at a more, I don't even know if more general is the way to talk about other conferences, but just, types of things you can discuss there that you can't elsewhere?
I don't know really. I think it's more than like specific subject matter. It's more about just me being comfortable. I'm not very good socially. So quite a few of the conventions I've been to, I'll sort of just go and do what I have to keep my head down.
Yeah.
Talk to people, talk to me, and then run away at the end of the day. So maybe I'm being unfair on them. Maybe if I went to the pub after, that's where all the fun happens, isn't it? And everyone let their hair down a bit. Maybe they'd all be just the same.
Well, I mean, so just on a surface level then, how are the art circles that you've been in or been around, how are they different from the game circles that you've been in or around?
Well, again, in terms of my art circle, that's very limited. It's art.
Yeah.
I went to, I did a year in Edinburgh College of Art, and then a year in London, Camberwell. No, sorry, 3 years in Camberwell. So that's not really the art scene, is it? It's the art school scene. It's very different. And it was a strange thing, because I was like 25, 26, I can't remember, when I started, so I was too old for it. It's all sort of kids with the idea of romantic ideas of what being an artist is. And I was like a grumpy old man already. So that was interesting. But I mean, I guess if I am to draw comparisons between those two, one of the big things is that even in the nice narrative games convention, everyone's, no, it's not fair to say everyone. There is people talk about like making money, about selling games, about about your audience, about like, even if you're having a conversation about your art, your game, some people will frame like decisions they're making on their game around like what people want, what they think people are going to like. Whereas at art school, you don't think about other people. You're a selfish lunatic if you're going to be an artist.
Right.
So it's all just like, I'm fantastic, look at what I'm making. Which is nice, I preferred that. I preferred that.
Yeah.
I want to be surrounded by a bunch of self-absorbed lunatics, because, I mean, it's more interesting to me. I mean, I suppose I'm a self-absorbed lunatic at heart.
How so? I was going to say, those are your words, not mine.
Well, I've clearly got delusions of grandeur, thinking that I can make a job out of making sort of very niche, artsy-fartsy
You
video
said
game.
yeah, I mean, you said in our emails before that you have you said you have no right making a living doing something so stupid. Those are again your words, not mine. Yeah.
Yeah, I stand by those words. I think it's a ridiculous thing to be doing. And to want to do that, like to think, I'm going to dedicate my life to making these personal things that I think are somehow important, and people are going to love them. Like, it's very selfish, isn't it? It's very delusional. I should be a doctor or something, if I was a real person.
Well, I mean, if you want to talk about, I guess grandeur, what would you make if money weren't an issue?
What would I make if money wasn't an issue? I don't know, but it would take me a long time, I'll tell you that much. I would take my time, and I would make... If money wasn't an issue, yeah, I don't know if I'd ever finish another project if money wasn't an issue. I'd probably start something, and I'd just let it grow and grow and grow until it's too late.
They just find it after you die.
Yeah.
In an incomplete state.
Yeah, it's still completely unplayable.
Well, there are people that has happened to. I don't know if it's happened with games, but I mean, there are a few I have heard of. Interestingly, a lot of them are janitors. I don't know if you've heard of these types of stories of, like once they're gone, people discover in their office, in a drawer, or in their home, multiple 1,000-page comics, and no one even knew that they were drawing.
Yeah. Well, Kafka was not published in his lifetime, was he? He was
don't know, actually.
Some sort of clerk or something, and then I believe he gave instructions to someone to burn all his writings when he died, and he went against those instructions, and they released them. I could be wrong about that, but don't quote me on that one.
No, that's okay.
My delusion of grandeur, and not on my knowledge of Kafka.
Yeah. I don't know. Yeah, I mean, so there were a couple things you highlighted. My use of the word ecosystem, and we talked a little bit about industry, and I don't know, game dev scene, and there's a lot of these things with anything. But you had said in our emails that you feel like the term game, just in itself, is not really that helpful, that they're picturing all sorts of things when a person hears that word, and that they're, as you said, definitely not picturing what you do. And so, I mean, this comes up a lot in these conversations, and I never know if it's just me as a writer, like if I plant this idea and people start thinking about words and what do they mean, and because I often wonder, like, well, do we just need a different term or more granular terms when talking about games, or will this just be the problem no matter like, let's say we find some magic new word, then do we just migrate all the same problems onto that word?
Well, I mean, we have words, because what we need is like 100 more specific words. But we can say narrative game and platformer, and so we can be more specific.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess we do need the word. I mean, game does mean a thing. It's just that the thing that it means is very unspecific.
Yeah.
And I think it's easy for people who don't know about games, like when someone asks me what I do, and I say I make video games for a living.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I usually just leave it at that. Like, I make video games, and then change the subject. but thinking about what those people take away from that comment, like they're definitely not given a clear vision of what my job is by me saying I make video games. They're probably imagining something much grander and more exciting.
Are there follow-up questions people do typically ask when they learn this about you? Or have you just learned to really quickly change the subject?
Yeah, I'm quite good at changing subjects, moving questions away from ones that I have to elaborate on to ones that the other person can elaborate on.
Right.
But, no, I mean, people do ask, like, it's quite often, have you worked on anything I've heard of?
Yeah, that makes sense.
And the answer is definitely not. I can guarantee you that you have not heard of what I'm working on.
Or you could say maybe, what have you heard of? And then step away as they list everything they've ever heard of.
Yeah, I think I should be more specific with I should say something that gives them more detail, but in like a slightly combative manner. I should say, like, I make artistic video games. They'll be like, okay, this guy's a dickhead. Let's not ask any more questions.
Nothing you'd get. These are artistic.
Yeah.
I doubt it.
I mean, highbrow interactive experiences.
Highly immersive, thought-provoking.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you said too, and I don't even know if this is like a controversial thing to say, because I think this is just true of like most categories of things in general. You said that most games are terrible, which just by like sheer numbers, like is just a basic fact that I don't know that people really want to acknowledge, because if it is a basic fact, then they may be making or contributing to that. So, I mean, does it go beyond that general numbers thing for you, or was there a more... I'm not even saying it's a bad thing. Like, to me, calling a thing stupid can be a compliment, or calling a thing dumb could be, like, oh, that's good, that it's not taking itself too seriously. So I guess, like, yeah, what did you mean by saying most games are terrible, and does it go beyond that, just sheer law of averages?
I suppose it probably does. I mean, what's the... people keep telling me the number of games that release on Steam every day. I never remember. But
I don't know, but that's only one of many places that people release, so it's like even higher.
Or something. Like, it's ridiculous. So, I mean, yeah, you're right.
How many? 100, you said?
I don't know. I mean, it's a big number.
Yeah.
It's got to be more than 50. Does it? It's a lot of games.
I'm going to Google it really quick and just see how many video games released per day. Oh, that's right. So here's the thing, and it says, just on the App Store, which we weren't even talking about, 500 per day. Well, that's actually according to an article from 2016. So it's got to be more than that, and that's only one data point on all of this stuff. So it's massive. Yeah, it's truly massive.
So there's like, let's say there's a lot of games released every day.
Let's just say there's more than 6, at least.
But I think also that comment probably comes from me having different expectations from games. I'm looking at them in a different way, maybe from other people, and probably from the people who are making these games. Probably people are making games that are very successful, and they're doing exactly what they want them to do. And I just don't connect with them. I feel like I should have been more polite and said, most games I don't connect with, or something more...
Well, again, that's true from a numbers thing, too. I mean, but so maybe rather than us agreeing most things are terrible.
You're not going to agree that most things are terrible. Sure.
No, I said rather than we both agree. I mean, no, I would totally agree. I think it's probably 95%, if I was being generous. I was going to say, rather than us both agreeing on that, I think it would be more interesting then to hear, like, well, what are your expectations of a video game? And I guess we're talking here about, like, when you're giving other people's work a shot or you're checking it out, right?
Yeah. I'm not sure. I think of my games, I still come at it like I'm making an artwork. Like I've got all my skills that are going into making a game are like the production of artistic things, making music or writing stories or drawing pictures. So I see the complete game as a piece of art. And that's probably my my mistake. So I'm not looking for something that's like wildly fun to play. I'm looking for something that like makes me think and impresses me. I like the feeling of like, oh shit, yeah, that's good. that's the feeling I want to feel.
Aren't we all though? Yeah.
I think a lot of people just want to feel, like especially from games, they want to feel, yay!
Yeah.
That's the feeling they're looking for. They're looking for winning a game of Mario Kart, which is a great feeling.
Right.
So yeah, I mean that's not entirely true. I mean I play like fun, in inverted commas, games as well, but mainly like with friends online. I play PUBG, which is like a terrible game by by any marker, but I've played like 1,000 hours worth of it because it's fun to go and play with friends and just be stupid in. So yeah, even for me, like I've got different expectations from different games. So when I say most games are terrible, I'm including games that I enjoy very much and play.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. Is like I sometimes have to clarify when I call a thing, you know, and this would be casually around friends or something. You know, I wouldn't like publish a thing calling a thing this is truly dumb. Like to me, it's like, oh, that's actually a compliment in my book. You know, like I actually really enjoy this, but. Yeah. You know, it's the same. You know, I think it's that thing of I won't even say for most of us, but I think that there's many of us who don't just want to keep getting that same feeling or response from, you know, whenever we turn to, you know, I mean, it's like, you know, why there's more than one type of food, even, you know, like we don't just want to be. Unless you're like having Soylent or something like that, then it's kind of a different conversation. You know, I think most of us are not necessarily looking for the Soylent of video games, but I do think that, you know, I have friends who, you know, all they will do, and maybe it's just because, you know, we're older and they don't have much time, so they just like they pick one series and that's what they, you know, that's what they stick to. That's all they're looking for out of a game. So. Yeah. It's complicated, I guess I'll say. Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
I hate long games for that reason, because I just can't engage with one thing. I mean, I don't have that much time to play games, for one.
Yeah.
So I just can't. Like, once I've sort of got the idea of it, I find very few games engage me for more than, like, 4 or 5 hours. I tried to play Death Stranding. It looked right up my alley, and I think it might have been like the weirdness of it and like the slowness of it. But like I think I played an hour and a half, and it was literally an hour and 20 minutes of cutscenes. I think it was it was like watching a movie, a long, quite slow movie, which was going to go on for another 70 or 80 hours. So that was too much. I like a game that's like, I can play in one sitting, an hour and a half, 2 hours, perfect. Move on to the next one.
Well, you mentioned too that and this would be interesting to hear you elaborate on, is you mentioned that video games, quote, don't make nearly enough mistakes. And I was just curious to hear you talk a little bit more about that. It sounded like you were talking about, was it just in prototyping them? And because you mentioned also like the freedom that one can have, like scribbling in a sketchbook or plonking down on a piano, that it doesn't quite work the same way in games. So are you talking about like when they're done in the end, or in the development of them, or what did you have in mind with advocating for more mistakes?
Yeah, the whole shebang. I think it's really hard. I mean, I suppose if you've got the time, if I was doing this fictional project where I've got all the money in the world and it can go on forever, then you can make fun.
If it's fictional, why not have it be more than one project? You could be doing 60 that will never see the light of day. Why limit yourself?
That's true. Well, either way, in that
Sure.
instance, you could make lots of mistakes in like
Right.
the prototyping phase, and I think a lot of people use that as like a way to quickly like test things. I mean, that's obviously the point, is to sort of test how gameplay feels and get the mistakes out of the way, because once you get past that, sort of things get set in stone very quickly, and you've got another God knows how long of development where you can't really be that free with what you're doing. I know a lot of people, even like people making games sort of like mine, like solo indie devs, who have like, do they call it a design document? It's like
Yeah.
they have the whole route map of the design process planned out from the start, which is insane to me. Like, you're gonna know where the game's at in 10 months' time and have any sort of even vague inclination that you might be able to stick to some sort of plan seems ridiculous. But it's a pretty common thing, I think. And so yeah, it's like the fact that it takes so long to make a piece of work, to make a game, puts so much pressure on there being a successful outcome. So you can't just make a bunch of shit games. I mean, you can, people do. You can do like, game jams and stuff where you spend a week making a game. But I don't know, there's nothing really with the same level of freedom and just ability to play and mess around and fuck up as in other forms like painting or whatever, music, where you're just constantly sort of making up as you go along. Or I want.
So you're talking about, but you're talking about like just experimenting and discovery.
Yeah. I mean, experimenting and discovery, but also taking creative risks. Like,
Yeah.
if I'm making something and it's going to take me a week to make, I can dedicate a week of my life to making something that there's a 90% chance it's going to fail. If, like, the 10% is worth, like, doing that. But if it's going to take me 2 years to make the thing, now I can't spend 2 years, dedicate 2 years of my life to something with a 90% chance of failure. That would be ridiculous. Even a 50% chance of failure is, like, questionable.
Right.
So you've got to be more creatively careful. You can't do something completely out of the box where there's no, like, precedent for it and no way of judging if it's going to be a good thing that you're making.
Well, I mean, we talked about this earlier, about the whole audience side of things, but I guess I'm curious if you have a sense of And we talked about this with the art style too, that shifting. But do you have a sense of like how people's nostalgia for older video games either blocks some sort of traction in your work, or seems to block like certain types of thinking about your work in general? So it may not even be about like stuff that you're trying to do, but people even understanding what you've already done.
I don't know. I've not really thought about that. I think, if anything, it's good. Like the point-and-click games, it's very nostalgic thing for a lot of people.
Yeah.
And I think without the element of nostalgia, no one would no one would play my games. So I think it's good. I think if you didn't have a fantasy idea from back when you were younger playing Monkey Island or whatever it was, got you excited, yeah, you might not pick up a point-and-click adventure game at all, because it's not. I mean,
what gave you sort of a bucket, I guess, in people's minds to land in, like a context to make sense? Yeah.
Even though I've tried to be quite sort of creative and make something interesting, what I'm making, they're very firmly within the point-and-click genre. Like, I'm not breaking the rules.
Right.
I mean, the first game was a bit different in that it played with the rules a bit, and I think that in that sense people did have, because they came in with the preconception of what an adventure game, a point-and-click game was supposed to be, and it wasn't that, and it was sort of mocking that. I think that was maybe to the detriment of that game. I know it got a very interesting review in adventuregamers.com. It was like, it read like a good review, but then it was 2 stars or something. And it's basically saying like they seemed to enjoy it and it was interesting and fun, but it wasn't a game. Like, I don't think they even said it's not an adventure game. They said it wasn't a game. It's like there wasn't enough puzzles in it to even give them enough challenge to say that they'd played a game. Because like adventure game people are like puzzles, that's one of the fundamentals of the genre, isn't it? There must be puzzles. So mine, it was based on a choose your own adventure story, and it was still a choose your own adventure story, but you played it like a point and click game. So yeah, for that one I guess it was to the detriment, but in general, without nostalgia, I don't think I'd sell a single game.
Well, yeah, I don't know what your awareness or curiosity about this might be, but when you first started making games, like, I don't know, like, what's something that's happening now with or around or in games that you never imagined when you first started making them?
I don't know.
That's also a valid answer.
What are you thinking that I might think here?
Nothing. It's just a question to throw out there and see. I mean, I don't know if you feel, because I know that you mentioned that you feel like you're a bit on the sidelines. I guess just like, if certain types of opportunities are opened up, or if certain things are thought about in different ways. Like, I guess, the thing of seeing a solid turn into a liquid, or a liquid turn into a gas, just a general shift in the, hate to keep saying ecosystem, but that is what I'm referring to, yeah.
I can't say I've perceived many great shifts in the ecosystem in the time that I've been making games, but it's definitely possible that a lot of stuff is passing me by because I'm not that engaged. I don't play that many games, and when I do, I'm never playing new games, so I'm not like part of the conversation with games. and my main interaction with that world is through Twitter, which is very, I hear the opinions of the people I choose to follow, and
Right.
that's pretty limited.
Well, so this will actually be my last question for you, unless there was something else you wanted to mention, or we obviously hopped around a bit just in the course of the conversation. Don't know if there was something you had in mind you wanted to mention, and nothing I asked connected with it and gave you an opportunity.
No, I didn't come in with anything I was trying to say. I'm not that book to sell. Buy my game.
All right. Well, I'll ask you this one big last one then. What do you feel video games have accomplished?
What do I feel video games have accomplished? This is the general term video games again.
Yes.
Well, that's a pretty big question.
Well, we could. I mean, can zoom in, rephrase if you want, if something's coming to mind.
What do I feel video games have accomplished? I mean, it's a huge industry, isn't it? Now, which obviously it's grown from nothing in a relatively short space of time to being just everywhere. I don't know. It's not accomplished anything. They're just video games. They're just you just play them. They're fun.